At first, everything seemed ordinary, like the glossy studio lights, the perfectly rehearsed smiles, and the comforting rhythm of another primetime talk show. The kind of show millions watched while half distracted, scrolling on their phones or folding laundry. But tonight, something was off. The cameras were still, the chairs perfectly angled, the backdrop a glowing map of America. But beneath the surface, a current was shifting. The show was called American Spotlight, a popular evening program where comedy and conversation blurred, and the line between news and entertainment stayed just foggy enough to keep viewers guessing. Tonight's guest, Trevor Noah, globally adored comedian, political commentator, and social media icon. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. He walked onto the stage like he always did, smooth, confident, flashing the kind of grin that seemed invincible. The crowd roared. Applause thundered through the room, drowning out the tension, but only for a moment. Trevor gave his usual wave, cracked a few lines about traffic in LA and billionaires trying to colonize space. He had them as always, or so it seemed. Then she walked in. Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in American history, entered without fanfare. No music, no applause, just the sound of her heels clicking on the polished studio floor, sharp and deliberate. She was composed, dressed in a deep navy suit that reflected none of the room's warmth. In her left hand, a slim manila folder. In her eyes, a focus so cold it made the air hum. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Trevor turned in his seat, still smiling, but it was no longer casual. His eyes flicked to the folder, then back to her face. If he felt threatened, he didn't show it. Not yet, but his fingers tapped the edge of the desk just once before going still. Karoline didn't sit right away. She stood facing the audience as the host, Jack Harper, greeted her with a forced cheerfulness that didn't quite land. Karoline Leavitt, welcome to American Spotlight. Quite a pairing tonight. The king of satire meets the queen of press briefings. Karoline nodded slightly but didn't return the smile. Thank you, Jack. I came to tell the truth. Jack raised an eyebrow. Well, let's hope it's a funny one. Trevor chuckled, leaning back in his chair, clearly ready to take control of the narrative. I'd love to hear it, he said, assuming it comes with punchlines. Karoline turned to face him fully. This isn't about punchlines, Trevor. It's about your platform and who paid for it. Silence. A ripple passed through the audience. Not a laugh, not even a murmur. Just the subtle noise of people straightening in their seats, shifting from passive viewers to active witnesses. Trevor kept his smile, but it faltered around the edges. He cocked his head slightly. You saying I'm sponsored? You think comedy is corporate now? Karoline's voice was cool, measured. I'm saying comedy became a shield, and you became the weapon. The camera angle shifted. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled, their eyes locked on monitors, hands hesitating over the cut to commercial button. But Jack Harper, ever the ratings hound, leaned into the tension. Big words, Karoline. Are you calling Trevor Noah a political asset? She turned to the host, her eyes never breaking their deadly calm. No, Jack. I'm saying he's not who he says he is, and I didn't come empty-handed. With that, she finally sat, laying the manila folder on the table between them with the softest of sounds, like a match striking the edge of a box, quiet but full of promise. Trevor glanced at the folder, then at the audience. He let out a short, breathy laugh, shaking his head. Okay, so this is what? An ambush? You think you'll go viral? Karoline didn't blink. I'm not here for followers. I'm here because truth still matters. Or at least, it used to. Another silence. Deeper this time. Heavy. Jack, eyes wide with the scent of controversy, tried to inject some levity. All right, let's not start World War III. Karoline, you've made a bold claim. Do you have anything to back it up? Karoline tapped the folder with one finger. You'll find out soon enough. Trevor leaned forward, his hands now laced together, the smile gone. You're accusing me on live TV. Of what, exactly? Karoline turned to him, voice low and sharp, of selling out, of shaping public opinion not out of conviction, but for a paycheck, of being a mouthpiece for interests you claim to mock. I have the records, the contacts, and the strategy notes, all of it, in that folder. Gasps echoed. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Is this real?" Trevor sat back. No punchline, no quip, just silence. The spotlight, once warm and flattering, now seemed harsh and invasive. He adjusted his mic slightly, stalling. "You think you're the only one with dirt?" he asked quietly. Karoline smiled for the first time, and it wasn't friendly. "No, Trevor. I think I'm the only one willing to put it in front of the world. And with that, the first part of the show came to a chilling pause. Phones were already buzzing, hashtags already trending, but inside the studio no one moved, because something seismic had begun. Trevor Noah was no longer the entertainer, he was the accused. The folder sat there like a loaded weapon, untouched but undeniable. For a moment no one spoke. Cameras kept rolling. The air inside the American Spotlight studio was static. Not just tense, but charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Every eye was trained on the table, on Trevor, on Karoline. Trevor broke the silence first, voice low and smooth, but no longer playful. Karoline didn't flinch. This isn't a smear, it's exposure. Trevor leaned back again, adjusting his jacket, visibly calming himself. His fingers drummed softly on the table, slower this time, more controlled. He wasn't going to explode, not yet. That wasn't his brand, but the calculated cool was slipping. Karoline, he said, now addressing her like a school teacher correcting a student, I've done shows in countries where governments try to jail comedians. I've stood on stages where you don't get to walk off alive if you speak the truth. You think a DC briefing folder scares me? Karoline's reply was immediate. No, but it should scare the people who trust you. That hit. Trevor's jaw clenched for a fraction of a second. Host Jack Harper, still trying to find his footing in the free-falling tension, finally spoke. Let's take a breath, he said, forcing a chuckle. This isn't Crossfire, it's Spotlight. We bring the light, not the fire. No one laughed. Across the studio, phones were held up like shields. The live chat stream was overflowing. TikTok clips were already being cut. The hashtag #TheNoahExposed had begun climbing the trending ladder before the first ad break. Trevor folded his hands on the table, eyes locked on Karoline. All right, he said, voice flat now. You brought your folder, you're making claims. You want to talk about money, influence? Okay, let's hear it. What exactly do you think you've got? Karoline slid the folder across the table slowly, deliberately, not opening it yet, not even glancing at it. You used to joke about power, now you protect it, she said. You mock corruption while you're funded by it. You punch up until the checks tell you to punch sideways. Trevor raised an eyebrow. And you got all that from a few emails? She smiled, just a flash of it. No, I got it from tracking every production deal, media affiliate, and quiet political advisory group your team's touched in the last 3 years. That got a reaction. Even Jack Harper looks startled now. You're saying Trevor has political handlers. I'm saying he's not the outsider he pretends to be, Karoline said. I'm saying satire became strategy, funded, filtered, and fed to the public under the illusion of rebellion. Trevor exhaled slowly, then looked out at the audience for the first time since this began. The crowd, once a sea of smiles and laughter, now looked back with uncertain faces. Some were recording, some were whispering, and some were just waiting. For the first time, Trevor looked like he didn't know what they expected him to say. You know, he said finally, voice softer. I always knew someone would try this, sooner or later. Come on a show like this, try to make a name by taking me down. Karoline shook her head. This isn't about me. If I wanted fame, I'd have leaked this to a tabloid. But the public deserves to hear it from you, live, without spin. Jack leaned in. So let's cut to it. What's actually in that folder, Karoline? You said it's enough to shatter a legacy. That's a big promise. Karoline paused. She looked around the room, then slowly opened the folder, not revealing the contents just yet, but removing a single printed email chain clipped together. She held it between two fingers, letting the audience see it but not read it. Private correspondence between Trevor's production team and a political media consultant, one who's worked directly with passees aligned with both parties depending on who's paying. Trevor blinked. You don't even know what those emails are about. Oh, I do, she said. They're about which topics not to joke about. They're about subtle framing strategies. They're about building narratives that benefit very specific interests. And they're dated long before you ever claimed to be independently produced. More gasps. Trevor looked down, then back up. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then he spoke carefully. You know how many people pitch me jokes? PR reps, agents, showrunners, everyone wants something. That doesn't mean I take the bait. Karoline slid the next document document out. Then why did your team respond with price lists? That line hit like a thunderclap. The audience made a noise somewhere between outrage and awe. Jack leaned back, stunned. Are you saying there's a rate card for influence on Trevor's show? Karoline nodded once. Not directly. That's how they hide it. It's coded. Percentages, segments, creative collaborations, but it's there. And the paper trail leads back to media agencies that have done this before. Trevor's smile was gone now. No punchline, no pivot, just pressure. He turned back to the crowd and finally, visibly, hesitated. His tongue flicked the edge of his teeth. A hand went to his temple. Look, even if any of this were real, you're blowing it out of context. Then let's read it in context, Karoline said. Together. She slid the page toward Jack, who hesitated, then took it. Trevor didn't stop him because for the first time, he wasn't sure what the next line said. Jack Harper held the document between his fingers like it might catch fire. He wasn't used to reading breaking news on air. Not when the subject was sitting 2 feet away, breathing, blinking, and for the first time all night, silent. The cameras zoomed in. The crew, usually invisible behind the fourth wall, was now visible in their tension. Stagehands stopped moving. Floor directors stopped signaling. The air conditioning hummed like background static in a courtroom. Trevor Noah didn't move. Jack cleared his throat and began to read. Regarding the upcoming segment on energy policy, would avoid any language that paints renewables as inherently beneficial. The client prefers ambiguity around climate legislation. Suggested alternatives include energy complexity, regulatory overreach, and market distortion. Let me know if you'll need an extra talking point package. He paused, looked up, looked at Trevor, then backed down. Also, immigration satire. Limit references to border conditions unless you're using them as examples of both parties' failures. The client wants non-partisan fatigue, not direct accountability. Jack blinked a little slower this time. The audience didn't gasp this time. They were absorbing, processing, watching Trevor's expression instead of reacting on cue. The laughter that once came instinctively now felt out of place. Trevor rubbed the bridge of his nose. His voice, when it came, was quieter, less polished. You don't know how these things work, he said, trying to summon steadiness. Writers throw ideas back and forth with agencies all the time. There's a lot of negotiation, but at the end of the day, I decide what goes on air. Karoline didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And you decided to go along with it, she said. Maybe not all the time, maybe not overtly, but you picked your targets carefully. You avoided certain topics like landmines. You joked about power, but only after it gave you permission. Trevor turned toward her, tired now. You think this is easy. You think you can hold a stage week after week with every camera trained on your words, knowing one misstep and the machine eats you alive. That's not an excuse, Karoline said. That's an admission. More murmurs rippled across the crowd. Some heads nodded. Others looked uncomfortable, divided now. Not between left and right, but between those who wanted to believe Trevor and those who were no longer sure they could. Jack set the page down slowly like it had weight. Trevor, is any of this true? A question simple in its words, devastating in its implications. Trevor didn't answer right away. He looked past the cameras, beyond the blinking lights. His voice, when it returned, wasn't sharp. It wasn't even angry. It was exhausted. There's truth, he said slowly. And then there's the version people want to hear. People want someone who speaks truth to power, but only if it aligns with their truth. I played that line. I admit it. I danced around some topics, avoided others. Not because someone told me to, but because I knew what would get laughs, what would get shared, what would keep the doors open. A long pause. I sold nuance, he added quietly, in a market that punishes it. Karoline's eyes softened, just a flicker, but her tone stayed firm. And in doing so, you became exactly what you mocked. Another silence. This one painful, not dramatic, just still. Jack leaned back in his chair, processing what he'd just witnessed. So, is that what this is now? Confession hour. Trevor glanced at him, then at the audience, then back at Karoline. No, it's just the truth, finally said out loud. Across the studio, the audience no longer looked entertained. They looked sober. A few had lowered their phones. A man in the second row wiped his eyes. Someone else muttered, "Damn!" Karoline picked up the folder, now almost empty. There's more, she said, her voice quieter now. There are meeting notes, invoices, memos, even scripts redlined by people who aren't writers. Trevor looked down at the table. I know, he said. Jack blinked. Wait, you're admitting it? All of it? Trevor looked up, meeting Karoline's eyes, then the host's. Not all, some of it. Enough. The words hung in the air like smoke, and just like that, the narrative turned. Not a denial, not an outrage, but a complicated, painful admission. Jack adjusted in his seat. "So, where do we go from here?" Karoline answered before Trevor could. "We let the people decide. The audience, the viewers. They're smarter than we treat them. Let them see all of it. Let them choose whether the truth still matters." Trevor nodded slowly. Agreed. For a moment, the studio wasn't a stage. It wasn't entertainment. It was reckoning. Jack looked toward the control room, getting confirmation that they were still live. "Well," he said, voice faint, "in 25 years of broadcasting, I've never seen a moment like this. Neither had the audience, neither had the world, because tonight the man behind the satire became the story, and the spotlight didn't blink. The broadcast ended not with applause, but silence. No outro music, no jokey recap, no feel-good sign-off from Jack Harper. Just a long, lingering shot of Trevor Noah staring at the desk where the folder had sat, hands folded, face unreadable. The American Spotlight logo faded out, and within minutes, the world lit up. The world wasn't waiting for late-night recaps. It was already judging. In New York, a group of media students live-streamed a breakdown of the documents Karoline had shared post-broadcast. In DC, an independent watchdog group called for an ethics inquiry into undisclosed media lobbying. In LA, entertainment lawyers scrambled to contain what might become a landmark case about influence peddling in supposedly independent entertainment. And in Johannesburg, where Trevor Noah's rise began, one of his former mentors was asked by a local radio host, "Did you see this coming?" He hesitated, then said, "No one ever sees the cracks until the light comes through." If you like this video, then subscribe.